What's going on, guys? It's Colteor here, back with another CI7 main event narration. And we've got two pretty different players making for a pretty interesting matchup here. We've got Kerts versus Kristyl. And these are two players that I'm really interested in seeing here because I've had both of them on my ADVPL teams in Season 2 and 3 for Kerts and Kristyl, respectively. Uh, Frankly, I thought they were both incredibly impressive both seasons. We had Kerts go 4-0 and beating some pretty impressive players like Leech and Endil along the way. And we had Kristyl, who I think went 1-4, but frankly got some very, very hard matchups and very difficult players to play against. And still, if you watch the actual games, played extremely well in those. Now, in terms of other stuff, Kerts has probably topped the ladder about 18 million times, whereas Kristyl has only done so, I think, once or twice very recently. So yeah, that's about their ladder experience. CI experience is Krystyl's first time, but she didn't even go through play-ins for a first-timer for the tournament. She got straight to main, and Kerts has been in main at least in 5 and 6, and maybe in the earlier seasons. I didn't check those. And probably at least in play-ins in the earlier seasons, because he has been around for quite a while. So, that's enough backstory. We know... Oh, predictions. Kerts slightly favored to win. Actually, more than slightly, almost double favored to win. He's got 55 votes to 30. So yeah, that's the backstory leading up to the set. I'm very interested in who's going to win, who's going to come out on top, what the game's going to be like, and let's see what the leads are to start. So, Kerts, Pert lead, and Metagross lead for Kristyl. So, entirely possible they're both offensive for both players. Possibly a defensive set for Kerts, though, because he reveals Fortress and then a Blissey. Very different from his absolute bread and butter spikes with Jolteon stuff, but he can certainly use other teams. Metagross coming in as Bliss gets T-waved by Starmie. Eats a crit T-bolt on the way in, that could hurt. Reveals lefties and a hidden power fire straight away in the switch. Knows Blissey's going to be threatened out and luckily doesn't catch the Swampert as she knows Kerts is going to want to get spikes up. And Kerts is forced to go to Swampert now, eats a Psychic and a Spadef drop. Metagross is faster as well. So no matter what, Pert is going to have to eat 2 of those Psychics. And with the Spadef drop, even Protect lefties might not be enough to save it. In comes Tar, however the last move on this Metagross set is usually Meteor Mash, and then Explosion. So Tar not perfectly safe by any means. And Kerts going back to Pert on the mash. That's a good play. Gets rid of the Spadef drop and gets him a little more lefties with Tect. So despite the Protect earlier, Pert now in a pretty healthy position as it lands a big Earthquake on the Starmie. And that's probably some kind of defensive me with T-Wave. Yep, recover. Doing a good amount of damage with EQ for a defensive Starmie, so it's probably not bold or anything. And Pert just Earthquakes again, get a little more lefties back as Starmie recovers, and recovers again. Now Fortress getting some leftovers back. It still is in Surf range, I believe, but I think one more round of lefties later and it'll be able to get a spike up on Surf. Not that that's necessarily recommended, unless Kerts is a Gengar or something to block spin, but it's an option. And of course, there's 4 other Pokemon in the back for Kristyl, which she could potentially spike up on. So, Metagross in again. Blissey not necessarily threatened out by a weak Meteor Mash, but Kerts chooses to switch anyway, in the same situation. You'd think this Metagross was a Jirachi because it's clicking Psychics and getting a Spadef drop what feels like every turn. And that is a big turn right there. I'm going to pause and drink water. That's how big of a turn that was. The crit after the Spadef drop easily kills that Pert, blowing it away. And if Kristyl has something like a DD Tower or an Arrow that's supported by this Metagross, hell, a DD Ment's probably very likely, as Kerts reveals his own Ments here to force out the meta. In comes Starmie again, Kristyl seemingly only wanting to use 2 Pokemon to beat Kerts' entire team here. Eats a Fire Blast, that's almost certainly a Mix Ments, unless it's either like Wish Fire Blast or DD Fire Blast. Those are both seeming pretty unlikely on this Fortress team. That's 99% of Mix Ments. Bliss gets T-Waved again. Is Kristyl going to reveal another punish? Nope, she goes back to the Metagross again. And Blissey T-Waved, probably even against a weak Meteor Mash, probably can't deal with it while it's T-Waved. And Kerts agrees. We goes back to the Ments. Do we see a mash? Yep, covers pretty much everything with the Pert gone. And it does 58 to that Ments. Is that a minus defense Mix Ments? Or is that like attack invested Mix meta? Jesus. Well, this Ments better have Wish if it wants to heal itself up later. It reveals Hidden Power Grass as Kristyl finally goes to a Pokemon that isn't Metagross or Starmie. Reveals Thirdmon Bliss. And doubles back to Metagross as Kerts tries to go to Tire to get some offense going. But he's going to be shut out. Oh, not entirely though. We see Dugtrio coming in on the Fire Blast. Kerts ready to sacrifice his Tire for Metagross chip, but he ends up getting Dug trapped and living the EQ crucially. So Dugtrio is down, which means it'll be unable to trap the Blissey later in the game if Kristyl wants that for some kind of Zapdos or Gengar in the back. Unclear as of yet what the last two are. Surf again. Is Metagross Krystyl's only reliable Blissey answer now that Doug's gone? Absolutely not. Should we see a Snorlax? So it's double blob for Kristyl with mixed meta. Interesting. Tire comes in, but it's revealed to be Suit Tire, so unless it's Brick Break, it's doing nothing to that Snorlax. Body Slam doesn't get the para, so Fortress is finally going to be able to get its layer of spikes up, unless he wants to raw boom the Snorlax or something, but nope. Body Slam and Flamethrower. This Fortress ran into a terrible matchup. Both the Pokemon it would normally spike on, Metagross and Snorlax, running fire coverage just for it. Wow. And the Tire does have Brick Break, crucially. And not only that, this Snorlax's choice of coverage seemingly leaves it without Earthquake to hit the T-Tire. And Brick Break again with the crit on turn 28. Now it's turn 29, so a second Brick Break puts it away. Starmie comes in. It's going to be able to spin at the risk of eating a crunch or just surf and be safe. Surf, the safe play, doesn't lose to random crunch, random stay in, and hits a Gengar on the way in. Good move from Kerts because he knows no one's clicking T-Wave in that turn. And forces the Starmie out as he just T-bolts the Blissey, sure, but he's got to have some way to deal with this Blissey. If he's got Toxic Blissey of his own, that would help. At least force it out, even if you don't force progress on it. And Kristyl has, I think, doubled out with this Blissey every single turn it's been in. Has not clicked a move yet. Metagross comes back in on Kerts' own Blissey, Meteor Mash, and it gets a guaranteed kill, which Kerts elects to sack the Gengar. So if Starmie gets in on anything, it's free to click spin if it wants. And with Fortress dead, that'll obviously be permanent. Tire crucially faster, but it is going for crunch and it dodges Meteor Mash. That is a lucky blow from Kerts. He might have really needed that, because if that crunch was a Fire Blast, it's pretty likely Meta would have just died. Well, maybe not from, what was it at, 80? 74. Decent chance it would have lived, I think, rough calcing that, but it's an offensive meta, maybe not. But yeah, that crunch did only 33. And Metagross missed a mash that would have wiped Tire to the next dimension, almost certainly, and putting this game very strongly in Krystyl's favor. Starmie coming in now on another crunch, and that is what Kerts was aiming for with the first crunch that happened on a Meteor Mash miss. That is well done from Kerts. He did not lose sight of his goal just because the mash missed and he technically got bailed. He decided it's still worth trying to hit that Starmie to keep my layers up, and he got to keep their layers. So for Mixments to try and get past this Blissey, and now with Metagross being low and in Fire Blast range, Mixments is suddenly a massive threat, especially if the last isn't faster. Let's see if it is. Well, let's not see quite yet because Blissey comes in despite the revealed Brick Break on Tar. Blissey thinks it can 1v1 it with some maybe T-Wave or Toxic, or what's it going to have here? It's slower than the Tar, so it's not some super speed invest Blissey. Slower again, Brick Break, and another Soft Boiled. This is technically going to work until you run out of Soft Boileds or get crit. So what's Kristyl going to do in the meantime? Another Brick Break, another Soft Boiled. Nothing doing there. Let's speed this up just a bit. Another Brick Break, I imagine, from Kerts. He just has to keep going for it. And CM from Blissey, maybe a bit poorly timed. Maybe should have done one more Soft Boil because it's in Brick Break range, but it lives barely. Would have died to sand had Blissey not clicked Soft Boiled. Wow. The CMs obviously aren't going to make it take any less from Brick Break, but it'll let it beat Kerts' own Blissey if it ever comes to that. Of course, it has to get through both this Tar and the Mixment, spamming Brick Break on it. Already down to 10 Soft Boileds, and those are going to keep running out even without any crits. So, unless this Blissey gets exceptionally lucky, and it does not. So, do we see Krystyl's last now? We do. We see a Gengar, which, unless this is CB like Johnny brought, it is not Ice Punch, no freeze. Looks like Kerts has this wrapped up, folks. Gonna see another Ice Punch and no freeze. So, yep, that is it. Mixments has won the game pretty much 100% of the time. You don't even need to risk Fire Blast here. In fact, you shouldn't. But, doesn't matter. Goes for it anyway, hits. If he missed that and missed the other Fire Blast with Ments, there was technically a chance. But, didn't happen, didn't get that obscenely unlucky. And Kristyl starts out 0-1 against Kerts. So, interesting teams, interesting take on Double Blob. Usually it's a lot more defensive than, well, I guess this is still pretty defensive with the Starmie and the Doug trio, but this mix meta putting in so much work really made it feel offensive. And of course, there was a bit of luck to it putting in that much work with it. Spidef dropping the pert and getting crits and all that, but yeah. And like I said as well, unfortunate matchup for the Fortress, getting a Snorlax and a Metagross with fire coverage in one game, and a Smitter. So yeah. And the Brick Break Tar honestly put in an insane amount of work. In fact, it basically carried. If this Tar didn't have Brick Break, it would not have gotten past the Snorlax or the Blissey. And it would have just gotten stuffed by one of them all game. So yeah, definitely Kerts thanking himself for making that choice in the builder before the game. And without much more review, let's move on to the second game. So if Kristyl loses, she is into the losers bracket, and Kerts is free for another week. So let's see. Metagross versus Skarm lead. Skarm fearing CB Boom potentially. Nope. Magneton comes in on a Roar. Magneton comes in on Spikes and gets roared as it T-bolts. Skarm healing up a little bit, and it's going to be a bit of a dance to try and heal it while Mag's still on the field. And we see just a slide from Tar, no nonsense, keeps the Skarm down, hit whatever comes in. Finds a Swampert from Kristyl, probably a more defensive Pert. Gets crit for 30, which seems like a defensive spread to me. EQ as the Ments comes in. And back to Mag for Kerts. Do we see a back to Skarm, which is exactly what he's hoping for? That is what we see. So well done from Kerts for making that double. He got the prediction right. He knew he was hoping the Skarm would come in, and if it doesn't, your team's healthy, low risk of switching into whatever the Mence check is. And Blissey comes in from Kristyl to force out the Mag. It doesn't really fear anything other than maybe some subtoxic nonsense. And just goes for a T-Wave, which hits Kerts' own Metagross as Magneton comes in for Kristyl. Unknown what was clicked from Kerts' meta, but there's no lefties. That's probably a CB Gross. And if it did indeed click Earthquake on against the Blissey, it would have wiped Mag off the face of the earth. Instead, it's now paralyzed and at 21%, but it is not a CB Gross, it's a Salac Gross, which is, of course, paralyzed, so it's not going to be outspeeding this part and getting a boom. It's going to be forced out by Earthquake. Unfortunate there for the Salac Gross showing. CB would have just been better here, and what the hell? Kristyl with the insane double Earthquake against a potential HP Grass Salamence there. Earthquakes into it to force the Metagross out. And the following turn, Earthquakes again trying to catch Kerts, going back to Magneton to catch, I don't know what, just scouting whatever Krystyl's Mence answer was, and apparently it was Earthquaking again with no fear of the potential HP Grass. Lax coming in, and Pert could technically 1v1 it, but it doesn't want to take all that chip against a physical Tar. So Kristyl goes to Claydol instead to threaten Boom, and gets parried by Body Slam. And decides to switch instead of actually clicking Boom as Shadow Ball comes out, which would have, I think, just killed it if Body Slam was doing 47. Probably a very offensive Claydol. All 6 revealed for Kristyl as Mence comes out. Probably DD or CB with Mag. There's no lefties, so that is probably a CB Mence. Unless it's Salac meta versus Salac Salamence. I don't know what Salac Mence would even do, but there you have it. A couple turns, Metagross gets sacked to the Swampert finally, as Kerts' own Claydol last is revealed. Spins absolutely free, no Gengar, no nothing for Kristyl. And a full para as Kerts' Tar comes in. Now what do we see? Because it could be a lot there. We don't see Jack or Squat. We see Claydol coming in to threaten Boom on the Pert that Kristyl was going to use to scout the Tar. So we still don't know if this is mixed with Rock Slide or DD Slide or what. And we see another Shadow Ball from Kerts. Hits the Claydol very hard on the switch. Again, would kill it if another one comes down. However, Kristyl switches out, goes to Blissey, which is going to be able to take any Earthquake for sure, unless it's like CB Doll. Not happening. Another Earthquake, and this Claydol is just happy to stay in for Kerts. It's happy to stay in, threaten Boom on whatever it's fighting at the moment, and click Earthquake, Shadow Ball to its heart's content. Earthquake again, Aromatherapy, so the Claydol is no longer paralyzed, which means if it is an offensive Claydol, it's probably now faster than Kerts' Claydol, and that is an unfortunately timed crit, and probably a high roll as well, given that the previous Earthquake only did 31. This one did 69 on a crit. That Blissey, if that clicked Soft-Boiled in that turn, then it would have just healed up and been pretty much fine to go to Claydol or to Mence or to Pert or to whatever and deal with the Claydol from there. But now Kristyl has lost a Pokemon, a Blissey at that, which is going to be pretty important for checking the Mence and potentially absorbing a Boom from Claydol. So this is looking pretty tough to win. Salamence could do something. And if it's not HP Grass Mence after all, then Pert just has to dodge both Booms from Snorlax and Claydol really to win. So interesting to see how Kerts is going to handle that. He could also have HP Grass on the Tar, which would make obviously Swampert way less of a threat, but Doll could suddenly actually deal with it if it gets enough health back. However, Doll might have to do other things here. Kristyl sends it in after the Blissey gets crit, and it is actually slower, but lives the Shadow Ball by the skin of its teeth and booms, trading with Kerts' Claydol and removing his boom from the field, removing one of his ways to kill Pert for the win condition. Mence comes in, and if that's a physical Mence, which it very likely is with Mence on this kind of team, it wants no part of dealing with Pert, and that is a curse Pert, folks. That is not just any defensive Pert. That is a real win condition. So looking at this Def Pert here, or at this Curse Pert here, it's probably not going to have Protect. In fact, I'd say it's guaranteed not to have it. So the only way it's actually going to avoid a Snorlax boom is either pivoting to Mence on the right turn, or getting enough defense boosts to live an Earthquake, or to live a Explosion. So, see if Kristyl can manage to do either of those. Currently, Body Slam, no Para, and another Curse defense boost, so it would currently, I think, live Boom, but be very weakened. If it can get another Curse before the Boom goes off, then that'd be big. However, Mence comes in on the Boom right then, right there. And that could actually be game, unless this tire is HP Grass after all. Comes in, Pert 94%. It's almost as healthy as it could be, and Double Edge is what it's going to have to hit the Pert. No luck there, as Pert's going to curse up and start taking basically nothing from those Double Edges. Kerts is going to need a crit or a bunch of slide flinches. Frankly, enough slide flinches would be ridiculous. Just go for the crit. He agrees, and Earthquake is going to cleanly put Tar down with the attack drop. Mence comes in, and I think even a crit HP flying from DD wouldn't kill here. Well, maybe it would. Did 21 there, but Ice Beam. Hold on, is that going to live? It lives on 1% with Sand, just by the skin of its teeth. An extra EV of special attack investment would have killed it from the Swampert. However, the second engine power doesn't crit, so it doesn't matter. Closer than it should have been. I'm sure Kristyl was praying to whatever god she could think of that the second hidden power flying wouldn't crit there. And luckily she chose correctly. Or maybe not luckily, since 94% of the time she wins there. But still. So yeah, another kind of interesting mag team with the Curse Pert and Offensive Claydol combo. Not something you see too often, but definitely a style that's been gaining a little traction lately. And you see Kerts, different take on his Claydol team here with more classic mag offense, Snorlax, DD tire kind of stuff. I really do like DD double edge tire, but wasn't the game for it, unfortunately. So, with that, folks, on to Game 3. Winner takes all. It is 1-1 right now. And frankly, both players have been playing very well so far with their very interesting teams. So, let's see who takes it. Lead, we've got Suicune versus Zapdos, very different from our last two lead matchups. Kerts gonna switch out, obviously very threatened by the Zapdos. Gets Celebi in, eats Toxic and HP Ice from the Zapdos, so it's already very weakened as the Leech Seed comes down. Doesn't go for the double Leech because if Zap just stays in HP Ices, that's basically suicidal. Goes to Jirachi on the Skarm for Kristyl. Fire Punch doing almost nothing as Spikes comes down, especially with Protect. No burn on the first Fire Punch, but it does burn on the second. So now Skarm's losing HP instead of gaining it for once. Another Hidden Power Fire, and Skarm's going to be denied its third lair, unless it has some way to heal that later on with Aromatherapy or Wish or whatever. But yeah, 8% burned Skarm. If there's a spinner like a Starmie or a Claydol in the back for Kerts, either one very possible, then those spikes are probably gone permanently. We see Pursuit Tire trying to get the edge up on Celebi, however, Kerts just stays in, Giga Drains away. Crunch not doing enough as Selby heals obviously with the Giga Drain, and would have killed Tyre with that last Giga there if it had stayed in, but it did not. Giga Drain and a Blissey, that's kind of unexpected with all these special attackers. You'd think a Doug, a Meta, and maybe like a Claydol last, but nope. We see Blissey here to handle the Zapdos, and does so very well. See Pert come in for Kristyl to deal with the Blissey, and instantly another double Jirachi in on the Suicune. Both players maybe not liking it so much, especially if that's not a defensive Rachi, but it is defensive, and it goes for a Toxic against what probably would be an Offcoon. So now, if that's sub-Suicune, it's pretty safe to set up against Jirachi, but if it's not, it has to fear Toxic all game. And Claydol comes in for Kerts. Gets a spin into the Gengar, and then a Psychic as Gengar switches out. Spin possible here again. It would live pump, and Kerts decides to go for it. Wow. So Claydol is basically dead at this point, and the Pert's faster. Probably off Pert in that case. Or just a very slow, like minus speed doll. That doesn't seem too likely. EQ coming down as Kerts decides to preserve the Claydol in case it can outspeed the Tyre or the Skarmsack or something. Pivot in on a T-Bolt and gain lefties. Coon is the Swampert answer, but it gets crit, and unless it has HP Grass, it can't actually KO the Pert in return. So Kerts decides to send in the Selby instead, and reveals Recover last. This is a very good Selby set that I've actually used myself, and it is quite a pain to the right teams, and this looks to be the team it's a pain for, at least if this Jirachi can get chipped in any meaningful way. Because with Hidden Power Fire coverage, you can hit basically everything except Ments and Gar super effectively. And obviously Fires, but, well, obviously Zapdos as well, which is going to be unfortunate here, but you Leech Seed all of those is the idea. And that's certainly going to work here. Plenty of Leech Seeds left as he seeds the Jirachi. As Zapdos switches out, even with HP Ice and Toxic, 1v1ing Selby from full while you're leeched, not a good idea. Zapdos comes in on a double, trying to Doug Trap the Wish Jirachi on a Wish turn, but doesn't get it. And Zapdos, obviously not fearing Doug Trio one bit, goes for Toxic, misses the Selby pretty crucially. And in comes Blissey. We do see Protect as the last move. This is another really good Zapdos set. It's good at beating pretty much any lead. It's good at stalling out Blissey with Toxic damage. Has very good coverage with HP Ice and Toxic to hit any ground type that could get in your way. Very effective. However, maybe not very effective here. We see CM Blissey. Obviously, that means very susceptible to Toxic since it's not going to be aromatherapy or anything. But it's going to be able to hit Zap a lot harder, and it's going to be able to hit this Pert a lot harder and freeze this Pert. That is kind of devastating. There's still options. Kristyl does still have a Tyre and a Toxic Jirachi and a Toxic Zapdos and a full health Gengar that could very easily boom it. However, Kerts elects to use this time to try and set up his Suicune, of all things. Goes for a Surf into the Zapdos and gets nothing but 33% chip for his efforts. Not sure if he just didn't want to risk the Swampert unthawing or if he really, really wants that Zapdos chip. But either way, that's the line he took, and Blissey's going to come back in, but Toxic this time. So it's not going to be setting up for any sweeps. And another, no, just a soft boiled here to keep Blissey healthy and face the Toxic. It'll get a couple more turns in, but with Protect, the turns are going to start going by fast. And a swap to the Jirachi, probably a kind of offensive Jirachi here. It didn't do very much to the Skarm, so it could actually be Def Rachi. But that might leave Kert's team a little weak. It could be a more non-modest CM Rachi. Don't get to see yet. We see Pert coming in to try and thaw on a Fire Punch, but doesn't happen. It does thaw naturally as Blissey switches again, and Suicune gets hit by another Surf. So now it would die this next time it switches in on Pert. Do we see Rest? I kind of doubt it. But we do actually see Rest. Wow, okay. And with Rest, that Skarmory is actually going to be able to use that turn to get its spikes back up against an 11% Claydol, unless the Suicune pulls Sleep Talk Surf, and it doesn't. Wow. So that Skarmory, by the skin of its teeth, on the one possible turn it could have gotten those spikes up, managed to get them up, and that's absolutely massive for the Zapdos, because with spikes, Blissey answering it with Toxic becomes even more of a challenge. Gengar, if it's Taunt, can get massive chip without even having to boom. It might be tough for Kerts at this point to pull out a win, but we'll see. It's still a 6-5 lead for Kerts. Leech Seed missing the tire as it gets a little bit of Lefty's back. About enough to put it out of Giga Drain range. It might be a roll, but Kerts decides not to risk it and go to Jirachi. Oh my god. He decides to either not risk the roll and go to Doug, or to catch the Jirachi and go to Doug. Either way, it's going to work out beautifully for him. I'm not sure if he saw the Jirachi trap incoming, potentially, as it came in on Giga Drain, or if he just wanted to play it safe because he knows Dugtro's not going to die to anything Suitar does. He's not going to have Ice Beam or something like that randomly. So yeah, I'm not sure which he was planning around there necessarily, but either way, it's going to work out for him as the Jirachi comes in, and as long as Doug can avoid a Fire Punch burn, it's going to be able to kill this Jirachi basically unscathed, and still be able to outspeed. Wow, it doesn't even live? It doesn't even live one Earthquake. That might be an Adamant Dugtrio or something, because that did a ton of damage. That's definitely a Spadef Jirachi and Adamant Dugtrio. So now, with that Jirachi gone, the only thing that really wants to take on Giga Drain and HP Fire coverage is Zapdos and Gengar, neither of which can heal, and in Zapdos and in Gengar's case, might not even be able to kill it without really booming. So, yeah, Toxic Chip from the Zapdos, that's at least something to beat the Celebi, but how is Gengar getting past it without Explosion? And if it booms, how's Blissey gonna die now? Well, one thing at a time, we see a Wisp, so that's going to help keep Celebi down a little bit. Certainly with Ice Punch, it'll be able to get even more chip if it has that even. Probably does, most guys do. We see Kerts go to his own Jirachi to scout said Ice Punch. Sure, it means his Jirachi's going to not come out of this burned. And Kristyl might still have to respect Psychic at this point, but doesn't. Goes for the Wisp and gets Psychicked. A crit that could potentially have mattered, depending on how little special attack that Jirachi had. If this Jirachi's low special attack, like I think it is, because of how little it was doing to the Skarm earlier, it was only doing 29 to like 33. Not very much, although I guess it is unboosted. No, I'm gonna calc that even. No, I'm not calcing during a narration. But yeah, that crit could have potentially mattered. Gar could have lived on a very small amount of HP, but didn't. And Wisp Miss is going to potentially put Kristyl in a losing position here. Since now if it's Super Rachi with HP Grass Last, Pert's going to take massive chip. But doesn't even go for that. Even if it has HP Grass, doesn't need to risk it. Kerts has a Rest Suicune and a Recover Celebi. These are pretty much the best part answers you can get. Short of like Milotic or Rest Sap. Even those two are probably worse than Recover Celebi, to be quite honest. Claydol coming in, potentially going to be able to spin against Zapdos later, but more likely, and indeed it does, just die to HP Ice. Even dies on the switch, so heads up play from Kristyl there. However, now Blissey comes in, and it's not coming in on a Toxic, even though it does get Toxic on the soft-boiled turn. So Blissey, very free soft-boiled, and it's basically back up to full. 92%, but there is a permanent spike on the field that he has to be somewhat careful of. Jirachi and a Protect from Kristyl on the switch. I feel like the switch was pretty likely there since he was Toxic, but I guess he theoretically could have stayed in a couple turns to try and get some Zapdos chip. Psychic, and here comes Tar. Even Pursuit Tar, which normally doesn't run a physical move to hit Jirachi, can still hit it with Fire Blast very hard, especially if Jirachi is lacking HP Grass or anything. And we see Roar, so that would absolutely dissuade a setup from the Jirachi there. And Celebi going to be able to live Crunch with Giga Drain if it goes for it, but it wouldn't kill. Goes for Giga Drain, doesn't kill, and is Kerts going to live on 1% in Sand for the second game in a row? He is. If Krystyl's using like 200 special attack EVs right now, she's got to be kicking herself because, again, the Celebi barely hangs on after a crunch, but this time it does not live the sand. And Dugtru's going to come in and finally finish off the Tar, which means Jirachi's a lot more threatening now, especially if it's HP Grass. However, with no Celebi, Zapdos only has to get past one special wall instead of two, so that is slightly less of a Herculean task for Krystyl's Zap here, which is looking to be our only shot of winning this game. Toxic and then maybe a T-Bolt crit or two wouldn't hurt, and you gotta time your protects so you don't protect as Kerts CMs, all of that stuff. Frankly, it might not be enough no matter what. Ice Beam, switch to Jirachi might just be enough chip to get there no matter what Toxic or whatever rolls happen. Now, Pert can, of course, force the Blissey out to an extent. Earthquake's far from a one-shot on Bliss. And, no, the Pert is faster, never mind. So the Pert is faster, which helps. And the Pert can also force Suicune in, which Kerstyl can take advantage of, like she did right there, with the Zapdos double. And with that Zapdos T-Bolt damage, that's probably modest. So a T-Bolt crit right there would probably win the game. However, it doesn't happen. What does happen is an Ice Beam crit as the Pert comes in. That's pretty devastating. A second Ice Beam still wouldn't put the Pert down. However, Blissey is now, because it didn't soft-build, potentially in Earthquake range. Well, now it definitely is after switching out on the EQ into Suicune. With spikes, it's in range for 2 T-Bolts, let alone an Earthquake. Suicune does wake up, get a Surf off, so now Zap's nearly dead. However, Swampert's also low enough at this point, it's going to have to respect dying to a +1 Psychic. Suicune dies and Blissey comes in, it's going to barely be able to live a T-Bolt here, unless there's either a crit or a full para. However, neither of those happen, and there's a Toxic dodge as Blissey just goes for the Ice Beam. Wow, well maneuvered there from Kerts. He managed to kill the Zapdos with Blissey still being alive. Obviously, the crit on Pert helped because now it's much easier for Jirachi to beat it. Even though he's going to lose Blissey right here, well, it might just come down to how much special attack investment the Jirachi has. If a +1 Psychic can manage to kill and just get there, or indeed 2 Psychics, chance for a Spadef drop, lives Earthquake, and unless this Swampert's Bright Powder and Leftovers, that's going to be the game, folks. Damn, what a close set. What a close set. All those games were really close, honestly. Decided by either a couple turns or like literally one move. Yeah, wow. Very easily could have gone the other way. I mean, especially in this game, if that Pert had just a little more health from the Ice Beam crit, it would have probably just gotten there. I can't help but wonder what the last was on Pert. If it wasn't Protect, was it like Focus Punch, just traditional off Pert? Probably would have gotten clicked into the Blissey at some point. If it was Focus Punch, maybe it was Roar or something? Or even Refresh. Never really got statused if it was Refresh. Wouldn't have shown that. Well, folks, I'd love to do a little more analysis, but it seems that's all my throat's going to let me. So yeah, very interesting set. I really liked seeing both of these players play up to their peak in this series for sure. That was very well done, very aggressively played by both players. And we're going to see Kerts move on in the winner's bracket into round 2, while Kristyl is going to be in the lower bracket. And yeah, hopefully their next series are just as entertaining as this one. And for now, I've been Colteor. It's been a pleasure narrating, and I'll be seeing you guys around. Have a good one.